My name's Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, we'll get started. My name is Rich Armstrong. I know most of you, if not all of you, know me. So this is PAC meeting number 10, Open Planning Studio number 8, PAC meeting number 11. Okay, so an awful lot of them in the past 2.5, 3 years. I'm just going to say 1 minute introduction that we've continued to be very active. We've had a number of presentations and public forums. We were with Asylum Hill Neighborhood Association about 2 to 3 weeks ago. We've made some presentations to various organizations. And then the team has been working on continuing to evolve this urban design, a very important component of the project, where there are opportunities for economic development. We'll share with you our ongoing assessment of the so-called capping alternative or capping scenario, and then a pretty new and exciting concept for an east-west linear park that would carry the East Coast Greenway. We'll do a recap of the February events, the PAC meeting and the Open Planning Studio, and again the CAP, the East Coast Greenway, some new data, some new tools that we're using that we think you and the public will be happy to see become available to you, and then how we're going to continue with public involvement this calendar year. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Morehouse.
Thank you, Rich. Actually, this is going to be a team effort. We have a lot of speakers, a lot of people. We've been developing this material so fast and furiously that there's been less and less time to sort of prepare and rehearse for these things. So we're going to be giving you some of the stuff that's relatively new to us too. But before I do that, I just want to step back, and I want to remind those of you who participated in the last OPS, which was in February, what we talked about, and there's some new faces here, so this is also a good refresher. Basically, the highlights of that, we were at the Lyceum in Hartford, the Frog Hollow neighborhood. It was a location where we were talking a lot about the impacts of the highway, and we felt that it was a good location to have this OPS at so that we could really engage the community and understand what the issues are. We had a variety of events. Obviously we had this PAC meeting. We had all the working groups and a public safety roundtable, which consisted of sort of the first responders, Homeland Security. A lot of those were responsible for public safety. Some other highlights, we had a pretty sizable group from the University of Hartford come in. We're getting more and more active with schools and students who are interested in learning about the project and incorporating this project into their studies. And one of the values always of doing these things here is getting our team together and having informal conversations just about design. What can we do better? What can we improve on? And we're doing that really dynamically, hearing from the community, understanding what your needs and issues are, and then trying to work up solutions on the fly. So these continue to be very helpful to us as a design team. So the last meeting, what we came to tell you about a lot was what we were doing to modify the lowered highway. This is alternate 3. This is the one that, based on all the traffic analysis that's been ongoing, seems to perform the best. And there were some modifications up in the Cogswell area around the Hartford campus, and how we can tie in the ramp system into the road. So we continue to look at options for that so that we're lessening the impact to the Hartford. We also looked at Park Street. If you recall, there was, they had asked us basically to try to bring the highway over under Park Street. We found that was very problematic because of the high water table and such, and the profile that the highway would take. So we came up with an option to really look at enhancing that highway overpass so that it was much more visible, bright, had pedestrian and bicycle amenities, and really bridging the connection in the Parkville neighborhood. One of the big ideas at the time was the new capped alternative, and we have been talking a lot about the tunnel and what's the value of the tunnel, and the engineers really were hard at work coming up with an option to take the lowered highway and cap it and give a tunnel-like appearance to it, and so we spent time sharing that with you all, and I think we've got some fairly favorable feedback on that. And then the possible urban design opportunities that come along with capping. And then finally, we spoke about this new study that's just kicking off just about now, which this team is going to be embarking on, and that's really looking at the 91 interchange, recognizing that 91 and the Bulkley Bridge are going to continue to be traffic bottlenecks. So what can we do, even though it's beyond sort of the scope of this project, what can we do to address that potential problem in the future? I'm going to go quickly through the working groups. You know, Mitch, feel free to come up wherever you are and in the back and just give a quick little summary of what we talked about at that.
So the Urban Design Working Group, I think we had a really good discussion, a really meaningful discussion with many of you here at the table, really talking about transit-oriented development, in using transit-oriented development, TOD, around Union Station, up and down the corridor, places around Sisson Avenue, West Boulevard, and Capitol Avenue as well, you know, to create active local streets and development parcels, you know, setting those up for that type of development, and really putting the guidelines, the partnerships, and the strategies in place to make that development happen after the highway project is finished. Because, as we all know, the private development side is really not part of the I84 infrastructure project. It would happen later, but the homework that we do now and sort of the vision that we create now is really important to make that, set those things up in the future. Collaborative vision between the state, city, and stakeholders, I think that speaks to that. And then also updating Hartford's plan of conservation and development, the One City, One Plan document, which is updated, due to be updated in 2020. So that could come out of some of these discussions.
Great, thanks, Mitch. I guess you could hand that over to Tim because he's coming up. I'll just quickly talk the Bike Ped Transit Working Group. A lot of discussion about the East Coast Greenway, how it goes through Hartford, how we can potentially capitalize on that and develop our own linear trail system that ties into the Greenway. But there was also a lot of discussion about, let's not make that the only bicycle pedestrian facility. Let's make sure all of our streets are designed with those modes in mind. Pedestrian facilities need to be generous. If you want people to walk and use them, they do need to be beyond just the minimum standards. And bus stops are often problematic. I know a lot of you who use the bus system know that it often stops at many blocks, and that's really difficult. It's difficult for traffic flow. It's also difficult for bicyclists that are trying to get around them. So we want to also make sure we're integrating those amenities in our design.
So traffic and parking, Ann, I think you were on the group. Did you sit in? Mike, and also Doug and Tony, I don't see her here. The focus was really on the parking more than the traffic, and we know there's going to be impacts with some of our alternatives, so we tried to focus on some of those areas and really try to be as transparent as possible and try to come up with some kind of alternatives to try to mitigate some of the parking if we can. And we suggested some high-level areas for parking garages, and I know Mitch's, some of his graphics do show some of those concepts as well, and trying to integrate parking not only for the businesses but also for potential development and try to really have a smart plan for that. We did look at some traffic and some roundabout suggestions and also some on Asylum Hill, but the focus was really on parking.
All right, and finally, this public safety roundtable was a really well-attended meeting. And, you know, the people that usually respond to incidents have obviously a lot of concerns about what's going to be replaced here in terms of a highway as well as local circulation. A lot of talk about the tunnel and how difficult it is to access incidents in a tunnel. Lots of concerns also about ventilation. How do you evacuate people in the event of a hazardous material accident or other type of accident? There's also a lot of interest in really shortening the duration of construction. So this got into accelerated bridge and highway construction techniques and potentially it being a better idea to actually close some segments or restrict some flow on the highway so that we can accelerate construction because shorter time frame means less impact over time. And we talked a little bit about some of the ramps that were going to be closed, some of the interchanges that would be replaced. The High and Trumbull ramps were ramps that don't carry a lot of volume today. We thought maybe redundant and possibly be eliminated in the future, and there wasn't any real objection to that. So those are things we continue to talk about, but hearing from this group of stakeholders was really an important step for us. So let's talk about now what's new. That was, is there any questions? Did I miss anything? Yes, Joe.
Shorter duration because is that a euphemism for let's close it all down?
No.
It's not.
No, I mean, I know that was something that was discussed as an idea several months ago. I think it's probably unrealistic to think we'll ever close the whole highway down. But there could be lanes that are closed down. There could be sections that are closed down. There could be other ways to sort of shorten the duration, which would have traffic impacts. But I think a full highway closure is probably unrealistic. Would you guys agree? Yeah. 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 We know it's been done in other states, and we thought we would start with the idea, but I think we're realizing that this highway doesn't have any alternatives. So where are we on the screening? Well, we continue, and we've told you now for last several months that we really believe that alternative 2, the elevated highway, and alternative 4, the tunnel, have some real challenges to implementation. We feel alternative 2 doesn't really satisfy a lot of the needs in terms of, I mean, it does replace the bridges, but it does not really solve our congestion, safety issues that we would really like. Plus, it maintains structures that would have to be maintained over time, which is another issue that we're not thrilled about. The tunnel, quite frankly, ends up just being incredibly expensive. So our recommendation at this point is to remove them from further consideration. I think we've been saying that, but it's a high-level decision. It's not our decision to make. We're basing that on our technical analysis. Federal Highway Administration needs to concur with that, as does the governor and commissioner, and those are discussions that are all ongoing. I think alternative 2 actually may need to stay on the table. It depends, but it is the alternative that has the fewest property and building impact. So we have to recognize if that's a big barrier to implementation, that's one that still may need to remain on the table. However, it's not a preferred alternative for all the other measures that we're looking at. So the timing of this decision, little bit to be determined. We know that it's in conversation, and it could happen in a week or month, a few months. We're not sure yet. Again, it's very high level, and a lot of parties have to sort of come to that agreement together. But what do we think we can do? Well, clearly we can continue working on this lowered highway alternative. We haven't had any real objection to this. Most people feel like it addresses a lot of the goals and objectives and purposes of the project. But there still needs to be work done, and we're continuing to refine. And we talked to you about capping options, and those are still possibilities. So those are things, various segments of the lowered highway, can they be sort of tunneled in effect? And that's something we're going to continue to explore. So again, why were we even thinking of the tunnel in the first place? It largely had to do with a lot we were hearing about from the public. You all, as well as many stakeholders, have pushed us to really explore the tunnel in great detail, and we have. Yeah, the tunnel doesn't necessarily do any better job moving traffic than the other alternatives, but really it's what we're hearing from the public. It's a lot about the visual impact, the physical impact of the highway relative to the neighborhoods, relative to businesses. So a lot of people felt the highway needs to go away, and a tunnel is one way to do that. There's a feeling that it better connects our neighborhoods. It provides these economic development opportunities in terms of maybe air rights development on top. It can connect our parks better, reduce noise and air quality impact, and improve overall aesthetics. So this is kind of the things we've been hearing, the values that we've been hearing from everybody and trying to roll into our project. Do they need to be done all with the tunnel? We think there's other ways. The capped highway. So technically this is a tunnel, all right, depending on the length of it. This is just a different way of thinking about a tunnel. It's lowering the highway, it's building it up on structure, capping it, and then potentially grading up to that cap. Dave, Tim, do either of you want to go through this? There's a little bit of a recap from what we talked to you about last time, but there's also some new ideas we want to share with you.
So we introduced this capped section at the last PAC meeting. And I know that we always present a lot of information, so sometimes you need a little refresher on what we talked about. And we always talked about the connections north-south and how important they are, and also some east-to-west as well. So from the Asylum Hill area down into the downtown area, we've always talked about that as being critical to the project and really trying to enhance those north-south connections. So this is an area where we think that a cap makes a lot of sense. This is one segment right here. And you can see about 1,000 feet and about $300 to $400 million for that one cap section. And then we took it a step further and we started inching towards the west and see what the other possibilities were. So for this scenario, we have the original cap, and then we have the second cap that goes towards the Park River conduit. So this would be the longest cap that we could put on the east without impacting the Park River conduit. And we've done some research on the Park River conduit and know that it could be difficult, challenging to relocate that permitting-wise, and also some other structural challenges. So this would be one other section. So this combined now is $600 to $750 million for this. And then what north-south connection do you gain was possibly you could have a connection over the railroad tracks and then go down to Flower Street. And we presented this to Aetna a couple of weeks ago. So that's one more iteration. And then taking it all the way to Sigourney Street. So now you have this nice east-west connection all the way to Sigourney. And we know that there's a bike path on Sigourney so that we could connect that. This could be some kind of linear connection that's not there today, an off-road connection. But then you look at the anticipated costs are 1.3 to 1.6 billion now for this, because we're capping over the entire highway. It's a lot of structure. And it would be in a somewhat of a raised section. I'm not sure. So then taking that from Sigourney Street going to the west, we were asked to look at what about options west of Sigourney? Could that be capped? What would that look like? And we started to lay that out. And again, so now we have a section between, this would be Laurel Street. This is with the lowered highway alternative with one of our options on the west. So this is Laurel Street to Sigourney. And yes, we could structurally put a cap over the highway. That's something that we can do. And then we started to look at some benefits, and we need to discuss that more, maybe with the urban design working groups and maybe some of the ped bike working groups, and see what the value is of that one. So about 250 to 300 million. And then the last segment is from Laurel Street, this relocated Capitol. And Laurel Street would be above, Sigourney would be above, Capitol would be above, so you could connect those. But is there a, okay. So now the issue is it would be sticking up out of the ground. It wouldn't be at that ground level, so there would be almost a wall there with the cap section to support the deck. So basically you're building a bridge above ground, a very long bridge. So we just started to look at this, and we'll have more. We'll add to it and more that we'll research, but this is just some possibilities.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So why were we even looking at this in the first place? Well, again, to try to achieve many of the benefits of the tunnel without the really extreme cost. We felt that we do need a better east-west connection through the corridor. Right now, that's pretty limited. This is a good way of really integrating all of the various urban design features: land, development, open space, environment, kind of contributing positively to the economic health of the city. That's obviously something that's very important at the city level. And of course, shielding the highway noise and the site of the highway to the neighborhoods. So what are the benefits? And this is exactly the kind of thing that we're still trying to assess. We're truly trying to understand, does this give everybody what they want? Largely, it's an east-west connection. We've had discussions with the city and many people, and we're sort of still amazed how many people really feel as if this cap is going to give people free access across the highway. We have to remember there's a railroad and there's a bus rapid transit facility there. So there's still a trench. There's private property on both sides. This isn't going to be a real easy thing to cross. The crossings largely occur where they currently exist. That's the Sigourney Street, Broad, Asylum. Those are the existing cross streets that you drive and walk through each day and every day. We have an opportunity to rebuild these wider, better, so they don't feel like just auto bridges. And that's something that we're going to be working on over the next several months to really show you how those could look and feel. But it does give us an opportunity to maybe, as Tim said, bridge this area, across from the Etna campus, bring people to Flower Street, improve those connections. So it's largely an east-west connection. I just want everybody to remember that because I think a lot of us forget that there's still a significant barrier to crossing and connecting north-south neighborhoods. Still expensive, $400,000 a foot. You think about that. Every foot's $400,000. It's a lot of money. We're still looking at the benefit cost ratios to see what makes sense because of those, Tim showed you about 5 different segments. Some of those probably do make sense from a benefit cost perspective. Some of them maybe don't. If we have to move the conduit, for example, it's going to be incredibly expensive. And what do we get for it? That's really what we're trying to ascertain. So we're asking ourselves, are there other ways to minimize the highway's impact? We know, and we've been saying this since back at the Hub study, that the section between Broad and Asylum is really probably the piece that gives you the biggest bang for the buck. It connects the Asylum Hill and downtown areas. It's a limited cap, but it has some real air rights development opportunities. We've shared that stuff with you in the past. So that's probably something we would really like to continue to work in the project. We're just trying to see if those other segments have as much impact. The rest of it, what could it be? And I think early on there were some visions of economic development, townhouses, other types of buildings. Likely that cap wouldn't be developed in a way that would support structure. Air right development is incredibly expensive to build. There's probably not a market here in Hartford for that. It would be a very, very long-term prospect. So what would be in its place in the interim? Could be open space, could be parking lots. Those are things that the cap could support. Again, limited north-south opportunities, and even with a cap, the costs are extreme. And we're talking, if we capped everything, over $1.5 billion. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Because again, we're looking at the value of this and what are we really trying to accomplish with a cap. Let's Go Connecticut, which is the state strategic plan, has a lot of unfunded needs. What you think, $1.5 billion could actually buy in terms of strengthening our transportation system statewide is really impressive. These are all the projects under $100 million that the governor would like to fund, but unless the state comes up with the money, are probably going to go unfunded. Between $100 and $1 billion. Again, a dozen or so projects. And you can see these are, Mike, when you talk about transportation and our ability to move goods and people, I mean, these are important projects, interchanges, missing links in the state highway system. Here's several more. And then there's the mega projects, the ones that are over $1 billion. Ours is on there. Again, this isn't a project that's funded at this point. We have Waterbury, the Mixmaster, which has significant problems. $7 billion, even bigger project. So there's a lot of needs out there. And we have to put that all into perspective when we think, is $1.5 billion something we want to spend on a cap? So we continue to ask ourselves, are there alternatives to capping? And we know there's partial capping opportunities. We just shared that. Can we do the same thing with noise or visual walls to block the highway's impact? Landscaping, berms, vegetation. And the latest thinking is, what can we accomplish with this East Coast Greenway, this linear pathway that we've been talking about? Can we achieve some of the same benefits with that? I'm going to let Mitch actually talk to you about this piece because some of this material I don't think many of you have seen yet.
Thanks, Mike. So this work, the ideas that I'm going to show you literally started on February 26th, the day after the last PAC meeting. Thinking about how we can make east-west connections through the city, connect neighborhoods, screen the highway, sort of in a cost-effective way, but also appropriately scaled and achieving the goals of a tunnel and a cap. So these are still very new ideas. We're excited to share them with you today and look forward to your feedback on them. Just by way of review, some of you might know about the East Coast Greenway, but it's a 2,900-mile long trail system, partially built, partially planned, that runs from Maine all the way down to Key West in Florida. It's really the most ambitious long-distance urban trail on the East Coast of the United States. It happens to pass through directly through Connecticut, directly through Hartford, directly through our corridor. So you can see that This is taken from their website. It incorporates waterfront esplanades, park paths, railroad corridors, and pathways along highway corridors. So we're very interested in exploring how that might work through our corridor. This is a map of Connecticut. You can see it coming in from Rhode Island to the east and then traveling through Hartford, shooting up north to Bloomfield, and then back down south towards New Haven and New York. And this is really what it looks like overlaid on top of the I-84 corridor. You can see downtown Hartford is to the right. It connects the riverfront. It connects through the I-Quilt project. Jackie's here, can speak to that. Comes through Bushnell Park, would run alongside I-84 highway, and then shoot up north on Laurel, and then come back down towards Sisson Avenue and extend all the way to Whitney, and then actually go north to Bloomfield along Whitney. So this is very exciting because what this shows us is that there are really important linkages and strong linkages that could be made from east to west, west to east, neighborhoods all along that connecting into this system and this network. So in terms of a concept for the I-84 project, we're really seeing it more than just the East Coast Greenway. We really see this as the potential for a new linear park in Hartford that could carry the East Coast Greenway. But really we want to say this could be seen as a park that has a number of different amenities, a number of different facilities on it that could be for pedestrians and bikes, it could be for recreation, it could be for commuting. Lots of connections from the south, from the north, the east, and the west, connecting those neighborhoods, connecting Bushnell Park to Union Station to downtown, and making those linkages. Initial cost, sort of order of magnitude cost estimate for this from really Bushnell Park to Sisson Avenue is about $200 to $240 million, and that would be in the elevated option. So what I'm about to show you are a couple different scenarios of how this greenway could work through the corridor. One is elevated, and one is at grade. And lastly, what I think is important to impress is that we're really seeing this as world-class design. A lot of people have talked about the High Line in New York City as kind of a landmark project, a landmark public space project for the city. We think that this should be particular to Hartford if this is the directions that's chosen, but that the design quality of it should be to that level, to be that standard of high quality design. I'm going to show you three concepts, A, B, and C, and these are also on the boards off to the side there. And again, this is really just showing the piece between Bushnell Park and Laurel here. To the left, it would extend all the way to Sisson Avenue. But what this shows is an elevated greenway that begins here, the deck on Broad Street, and really the capped area between Asylum and Broad. So in each of these scenarios, you'll see that the cap is included at Asylum and Broad, which then flows into an elevated greenway system between Broad and Sigourney. And it would be alongside I-84, it would be elevated. You can see in the section here at the bottom, in this scenario, it's cantilevered over the highway lanes, over the eastbound highway lanes. Really an elevated park. It would make connections to Etna to the north and Flower Street to the south. So that Flower Street connection could be put back in some kind of way, shape, or form with a ramping system that goes up to the greenway, over the highway, and then to Etna and Flower Street on the other side. This is a zoom in of the section of what that would look like. Importantly, what you're seeing here is the elevated greenway above the highway, but what's also here, integrated within the column structure of this greenway, would be a screen wall. And that screen wall could have landscape with it. It could be a number of different things. We really haven't gotten that far with the design of that piece. But what that does is it would screen the highway from street level along Capitol Avenue. So if you're standing on Capitol Avenue looking towards I-84 to the north, you would see this elevated greenway. You'd see wall and landscaping. You'd basically see an elevated park in your view. And we have a perspective of what that looks like in a second. You can see the ramp dashed in down to Flower Street here, 5% ramp coming down to Flower Street, and then the ramp crossing the highway and going towards Etna and Flower Street to the north. This is concept B. It's basically the same concept of an elevated greenway. It's just slightly pushed to the south of the highway. You can see it here with a double structure and the zoom in of that section, again with the wall, visual barrier, noise barrier, underneath the elevated park, which is up here on top, ramps down to Flower Street and across the highway as well. And then concept C, we looked at how could the greenway work if it were at grade, on the ground, just coming through the parking lot, behind the current, into Bushnell Park, and extending to the west along Laurel Street. And in all of these scenarios, we're talking about a width of probably 30 to 60 feet in terms of the linear park, and it varies depending on what kind of the condition it's going through in the urban environment. This is a section of the at-grade park. Again, with the screen wall and landscape surrounding it. We looked at some precedents, and we also kind of gave some thought to the idea of how that wall could function underneath the elevated greenway. This is actually a project in Chicago that we found. It's called the Navy Pier Flyover. It's alongside Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. And this has similarities to what we're talking about. It's not exactly the same kind of context, but you can see this is primarily a bike path. There's no sort of park or landscape elements to it, places to sit. This is a way to get cyclists from sort of one side of the Chicago River to the other side of the Chicago River. But what we thought was interesting here is, you know, the kinds of treatments that they're thinking of in terms of screening parking decks and screening highway and screening noise. And so we were kind of intrigued by that image and, you know, did some testing of our own of what that could look like in Hartford. This is the view that I mentioned before. This is as if you were standing at the intersection of Capitol and Broad Street, you know, as a pedestrian. You've got the parking lot of the current in front of you, and you're looking towards the Aetna building here. This is Flower Street, and this is the ramp that would go up to the greenway, the multi-use greenway, East Coast Greenway. And this would be the greenway itself, this yellow line coming through here on structure with a green wall, landscape, other types of treatment that would block out the highway behind it. Because the highway behind it, now it's at grade. This is the lowered highway option. One other thing to point out about this diagram is that the East Coast Greenway or multi-use greenway would not be strictly flat. It would actually have some kind of up and down movement to it to actually relate to the ramps that are coming up to meet it. So the grades are being worked out in terms of 5% slopes and things like that. And this is just a conceptual view of what that linear park could look like. You know, very early, you know, made some assumptions about what the materials would be, what the quality of this would be. But again, we're trying to imply that this is a high-quality design. It's like the High Line in New York City. It's moving people, it's pedestrians, it's bikes, it's connected to lots of different neighborhoods, and really envisioning some of the urban design or some of the transit-oriented development elements that I was talking about earlier, sort of at one end of the line, facing Bushnell Park, really making those strong connections through the corridor. And these are other precedents, other images that we found to be relevant or compelling for this idea. You know, actually one in Hartford over I-91, that kind of corridor. This is the High Line actually in New York City. There's another project in Chicago called the 606 Bloomingdale Trail. It's a very interesting linear park north of the city. We think that has some elements that could be applied to this as well.
Mitch, so again, when we're going to show this graphic again, what does this do in terms of connectivity? It does pretty much the same thing the capped highway does. Gives us that strong east-west link between Sigourney and Bushnell Park. We still have the crossings north-south to contend with. And again, we'll be working on making those very strong crossings, but they'll all be going over the highway. So we can get the same connectivity benefits with the trail that we could with the capped highway. This is a screenshot from the model that Nick and company in the back are going to be demonstrating. You can actually get a look at this trail from lots of different perspectives and angles, so visit Nick later if you want to really see what this looks like in the model. And there's that crossing to the Aetna and down to Flower Street, one potential alignment. It might not be that straight or, you know, look exactly like that, but again, give you a sense of really how to reconnect that missing piece that, that disappeared when Flower Street was closed. I think a lot of you probably are wondering why we're spending so much time at these meetings on urban design and bike ped connectivity. And you know, I think we're at that point in the project where we have an alternative that we think satisfies. We've you know, the traffic needs, the safety needs, the structural needs. We've worked out a lot of the details. We continue to model and test, of course, but we're sort of maximizing everything we can do on the traffic side. We're getting down to the local system now. We're getting down to the local streets, understanding what they need to look like. How do we move people in other ways? How do we integrate development? So these are kind of the pieces that are now becoming really an emphasis for our project team, and they will continue to be over the next several months until we reach a preferred alternative. Rest assured, we haven't stopped on the technical analysis for the other stuff. It's just that this is the thing that we're really focusing energy on now, as we've spent a lot of the time up front on some of the real pressing purpose and need items from our project statement. So at this point, I think, Dave, we have some surveys and things that you want to quickly update everybody about?
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we've been you know, working on a few things. One of the things I want to talk a little bit more about is we've had a lot of people that have asked us, you know, I know, you know, this is how I travel today. I get on the highway here to go from home to work. This is how I go back to home. With our alternative analysis, you know, with our new alternative, how will I go for my new trip? Now, what we've done is we've actually worked on this analysis tool that we actually are testing today. We're hoping you're going to go over there and work on this, but we've actually used our transportation demand model, a lot of our signal analysis, traffic analysis. We have this set up now that hopefully this will be interactive on our website, that you can actually go on there and plot in your origin and destination through our area. It will actually tell you where you go now. You could test that. So that's what we want to test today, but also where your new trip will be under the new alternative. So we've had a lot of people say, how, you know, the Assistant Avenue ramps are gone. How am I going to get on the highway? Well, this will actually plot that for you, and it'll also give an estimate of time. You know, how much time it takes you today to make that trip, and the estimate of time in the future. So we're hoping that this is, yeah, go ahead, Jennifer. This is vehicular right now. Yeah, we haven't quite got to the bike and ped yet, but I think any improvements that we do here will be drastically different than the bike and ped. So we're creating a lot of new paths and a lot of great paths for bike and ped that don't exist today. So we're hoping you can go over, we actually have Doug Lynch, Doug raise your time, and also Pat, you know, that are actually developed this model. So we're hoping you go over there, and we actually want to test this first, beta test it. Probably a lot of you who are in this room are the best people to do that. So we have, you know, we've run a few scenarios. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think this just goes back to the broader point that if we don't improve the interchange, that same clog is going to be there. So how is anything going to be? I think maybe your study takes some liberties as far as how it's going to improve.
Yeah, this does not cover the interchange. You still have to deal with it. So this is really just in our corridor, okay? So if you're coming over the Bulkley Bridge now, you have all those backups, that's going to be there today. You know, we are doing the interchange study. We're going to be addressing that, but this is just in this area. We've had a lot of people that live in this area that get on the highway now at a certain ramp, and they're wondering under the alternative, boy, where am I going to go? Where am I going to now get on the highway and get off? So this is really the model for that. That's where we're really after. Okay? So we're hoping you can go over and test that out. And like I said, we're hoping to get this interactive on the website, but we're also hoping to further do this during construction. So we actually have closure of roads and things, that this model will be open where you can actually go in there and interactively get how you should travel or what the best suggested way to travel through the area is. So we have a lot of hope on this. This has really never been done for a project of this magnitude, but we're hoping you can go over and do that. Now, the other things that we're working on is there's a lot of transit surveys going on right now. There's a couple directly that we're doing as a project, and there's a few others that the Capital Regional Council of Governments is doing. So one of the things that's happening right now is we're doing a transit onboard survey. We've actually hired about 40 temporary employees in the Hartford area. A lot of them are from Hartford and the region. They are actually out there now riding the bus routes, doing a lot of, it's basically off an iPad to get a lot of data. We're looking to use the trip information, you know, where they start their trip, where they end, frequency, a lot of the demographics. And what we're doing is we're looking at, you know, when we go to construction and we start analyzing different, you know, construction scenarios over the next year or two, we're looking to see how we can maximize the transit usage to get people out of cars. So we're really going to see if there could be improvements as far as bus routes, what makes sense. So this is happening right now. We're actually going to finish this the end of May, and then we're hopefully going to have all the analysis done, update the transportation demand model to have that ready at the end of the year. So that's one of the surveys that is actually happening. We're actually doing also a stated preference survey. Now this is actually for people that are currently on the highway in their cars commuting. The sensitivity as to what would take them to get them out of their cars onto transit. So this is also going to go happen throughout this year. We're hoping to get probably 2,000 or 3,000 people involved in this. We actually did this a couple years ago for this the toll study. We're probably going to still approach a lot of the employers to see if they can get this to their employees to fill out. So this is another one. And there's also a statewide household survey that's actually happening right now. So, and Jennifer, there's probably a couple others I know. We're actually looking at the bus routes in the Hartford area too right now in another study. So just to make you aware of that, there's a lot of these different surveys going on. So some of these will directly impact our project, but I think a lot of them will also go to the regional improvements and actually help Prague to plan some of their future transportation projects. Okay, Mike, or Marcy, okay. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you about what we've been doing in public involvement and what's coming up in the year ahead. After the flurry of 2015, I think we all wanted to take a little bit of a step back and evaluate what we did last year, what worked, what didn't, what could be improved, and you know, how do we get the best public involvement process. So the original goal was early and continuous outreach. The purpose of that was to ultimately get the best project that we could. One of the things that a lot of the outreach that we've done, it's, you know, the public, you've really challenged our team. You know, we've changed our designs based on things that you've told us. We've had to come up with new and innovative ideas. So we know to a certain degree things are working well. We've come up with some better design solutions, but ultimately, through the PI process, our goal is to get to a decision that everyone can accept and benefit from. We're still working on other things too. We're not perfect. One of the things that we know is, you know, there's a large segment of the population in Hartford that we are still needing to work really hard to reach. In Hartford alone, the Hispanic population is 40%. That's really high. We don't have 40% of our population in this room that's Hispanic, so we know it's not equitable at this time. We also know that 16% of the population in Hartford doesn't speak English very well. It's not enough to just translate. We need a new message, and we need to do Spanish-specific things. So I mentioned we took a step back. We're doing a review, and we've had a lot of informal interviews with people in the community, and we've really targeted what we call environmental justice, the environmental justice component of our outreach. And this is to low-income and minorities in the region. And we've heard a lot of different things, but what I'd like you to leave with is we have been given a lot of new, great suggestions on how we can improve or tweak some of the things that we're doing moving forward. We've also heard that, you know, we've heard it from the PAC, we've heard it from many of the communities and the people that we've been meeting with, that I-84 really did divide this city. and that it needs to bring it back together. When it's redone, it needs to be done so that there can be new connections. And what I want to say here is not only are we hearing that from the grassroots level, but we're also hearing it from the top. Just a few weeks ago, Secretary Fox put out a YouTube video that talked about this very topic. We're hearing a lot of the same themes, but some different concerns. People are interested in access and opportunities for economic development. That doesn't mean that everyone wants things to be built up very quickly. Some people are cautiously optimistic about it. Everyone wants strong communities, strong connections. Air quality has been raised as an issue. We know that people do not want to see things get worse. Mobility, Mike talked a lot about what's going on our side roads and what we're looking at. That is huge. Mobility during construction is another thing we've heard a lot about. And then finally, Dave touched on the jobs. If we're going to bring a really, really huge project to this region, a lot of the residents in Hartford would like to see some jobs come out of it for them. So I didn't go into too much detail. I'm happy to talk to any of you after the meeting about some of the things we're doing. But one of the things that we did last year that we're going to continue to do are what we call our pop-up events. And we have our little traveling roadshow. We go to fairs and festivals throughout Hartford. And this is what we have coming up. You know, the season is really kicking up. And we did the Puerto Rican Festival and Parade last year, and that worked out really well. We're looking to get some community partners for that. And the Head Start Spring Fling, we don't have the date yet, but we are signed up for when it is scheduled. So come out, see us at those events. It's a real great opportunity to casually talk to our staff. Next steps.
Thanks. That takes us pretty much to the end here, and we can entertain some Q&A. But again, you know, we're not just focusing on urban design. You know, we're working through our screening documents. We have a screening report that's going to CONDOT for review. We're working on our alternatives analysis report. Christine and AECom's working really hard on the NEPA documentation. Lots of moving pieces in this project. We're trying to bring to you the relevant stuff that's sort of new and current that we're working on. But there's a lot. I don't expect you all to read. I see some of you getting your glasses out. But there's boards that cover this material too. Basically, there's just a lot of sustained outreach through 2016. That's not going to slow down. It'll slow down at some point, but right now we're going to continue to be visible. We're going to continue to be transparent in our message, and continue to work through the technical aspects of the project, and continue to develop these alternatives in a way that we can all hopefully get on board with and advance forward to the next phase of implementation. So with that, this is the question and answer portion, and we have lots of team members here available to answer questions, and I'm not surprised. Mike, you take the floor first. Is there, who has the?
I don't need it.
Stan needs it.
Do you know what percentage of this project would be paid for with federal funds using the established system?
I'll let CONDOT answer that.
Everybody always asks about funding, and I never really have a really good answer because it's an unknown. I will say the project qualifies for generally 80 to 90% federal dollars. That's what it qualifies for, but we have limited amount of federal dollars available to us. So if you remember, there were 3 slides that showed you a list, any number of 30 projects, plus or minus, ranging from 10 million to, I think the highest is 7 billion. And that list comes from the governor's Let's Go CT vision plan. It's his 30-year plan. And basically, unless the amount of money that we receive from the federal government, which is not likely to occur, and we certainly couldn't plan on it to happen, and if the state of Connecticut doesn't step up its contribution, those are projects that are likely to go unfunded. That's what that list is. And that, I think they added up to about $30 billion. So that's why the governor and the commissioner have said, you know, the state really needs to step up to the plate and invest, not just to maintain what we have in its current condition, but to do these kinds of enhancements. And I think this project, the i84 Hartford project, is seen as both a necessary infrastructure remediation, but also an enhancement because of all the other characteristics that it can provide, the economic development and all the reductions in impact to the communities. But it fits, it's the second most expensive project on that list. So it does qualify for federal dollars, but there's a big gap in what we currently have available. And Dave Nardone from Federal Highway wants to add to that.
And before this process is over, the DOT will come up with a financial plan to fund this project, and that's when they'll figure out how this fits into their other program and what funding types they want to use.
And the money for that will come from the bicyclists, from the trains, from the buses. The money for this will come from rubber-tired vehicles that operate on highways, whether it be registration license fees, fuel taxes, or the T word. This is the worst congested intersection in New England. And you constantly tell us that we can't do anything about that. And so what we see are buses, we see pedestrians, we see greenways, we see every bit of frosting that you can think of, and you're telling us that we can't have any cake. And so, in our opinion, for the people who pay for all of this, people from Nevada who pay when they come through the state of Connecticut, fuel taxes or whatever, this is not a success unless you address the congestion problem. This is not Hartford's project. This is not an urban renewal project. This is an interstate highway that's broken that needs to be fixed. And you're telling us you can't fix it, but we can do all this other stuff. So if this is what this project is, it does nothing for our constituents.
All right, so I'm going to respond. You thought so. I think we, in the past presentations, we have said through the traffic analysis that there are a number of really good design solutions that we support, including the lowered alternative and certain options within the lowered alternative that will address the structural deficiencies. We're going to replace the structures or eliminate them. We are going to improve safety dramatically, we think, by modernizing the highway, eliminating all those obsolete design features, eliminating ramps where necessary, spacing them more appropriately. We're going to improve operations and safety, and we are going to reduce congestion. And we can bring up those graphics. If they're not on display here, we can show them, because we've shown them in the past, where there'll be a dramatic improvement in the amount of congestion. But what we have said, and to your point, is we are not going to eliminate all congestion because of the constrictions, the bottleneck, at the 91-84 interchange. And we have said that we're going to continue to focus on this 2-mile section because it all starts with the deficient structures that are deteriorating. And we're going to continue to focus on that 2-mile section. But at the same time, the governor and the commissioner and the bond commission have given us state dollars, $200,000, and $800,000 we plan on matching with federal dollars to study exactly the bottleneck that you're referring to, which is the interchange and the Bulkley Bridge. And we have graphics over here that illustrate what that study will be. And so we're addressing your concern, and a lot of other people have said what you've said. What about the congestion? What about the bottleneck? So I think we've been as responsive as we can be. It's not part of the project. Maybe it will be in the future. But you have to understand, this is a big bite out of a big apple that we're taking. And this additional study is another huge apple that will be a big bite. So I think we've tried to be as responsive as we can.
Rich, can I just, let me just, because I can maybe feel the angst of some of the transit and bicycle and pedestrian advocates in the room. Many bicyclists and pedestrians own vehicles. They do pay registration. They do pay taxes. But we need a modern transportation system too. We can't rely completely on our highways to solve all the problems. So that's why mobility encapsulates everything else transit, bike ped. If we can get just a few % of people from using the highway to make a short distance trip, we're making a congestion reduction. There's potential in that, because that's the turbulence that the people that are crossing over, going ramp to ramp. We want to keep the highway preserved for the through traffic, for the trucks, making that smoother and more efficient. That's why we're spending a lot of time trying. The costs of some of these extras, the frosting, they're really marginal in cost, but they could actually have a real meaningful impact on our overall transportation system in the city. Let's face it, we're going to spend $5 billion. I would hope that we would do something to enhance the urban environment in the process, because just replacing a bunch of deteriorating bridges, there's not a whole lot of bang for the buck. So this really has to go beyond just solving that. So that's why we're being holistic in our approach.
Are you good with that?
Of course not.
Another question?
We used to say 5 billion. They thought the big dig was going to be 2 billion, and it was 22 billion, and I thought it was going to be, however many years, it was like 20 years. But I sarcastically say, at least it improved traffic flow, to Mike's earlier point. How do we know that we're not going to have cost overruns and time overruns here?
The vast majority of public works projects around the world, maybe 80%, don't meet their budget. But we've learned a lot from the Big Dig. There are a lot of bad outcomes and lessons learned from the Big Dig that we're applying under this project, including the cross-risk analysis that we did before we even got started. And so that's why when we present costs, we present them in a range, because we can't be that precise at this point. And we factored in as many unknowns that we can in terms of what-if scenarios. Kind of those things that could dramatically affect costs, the risk analysis. And we're going to continue to do risk management, because that was one of the big outcomes from the Big Dig and other very large projects around the country, that you need to apply risk management when undertaking a public works project. So we're very early. We're 5%, 10% at the most into a design. So we have 90% more to go in terms of really understanding what this design is going to look like and what it's going to cost us. And we're just going to have to manage it on an iterative basis as we progress. In fact, we plan on doing another probability cost risk analysis later this year to see if our $4 to $5 billion range is still on target. So we're going to use all the tools and techniques and strategies for good management.
Aaron? To the microphone.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, all. What many folks in this room don't know is I'm a civil structural engineer. I've done a fair amount of highway and traffic design in the past. And Mike, to your point, every study has shown that when you waste money to reduce highway congestion, the only thing you do is you create more highway congestion. There is no greater waste of highway funding than to build bigger and wider highways. There is no project, when we talk about the costs on here of the other projects in the state, there is no project that will have a greater economic impact on this state than this project. We're living in a time when companies are moving from suburban Fairfield to urban Boston, not coincidentally, right next to where they just buried a highway, in one of the fastest growing areas in this country. Because we're living in a time when our population wants to live in urban areas, wants to be able to bike and walk to work, when employers are trying to maintain and keep millennials here in Connecticut. We're constantly discussing how can we keep millennials and the generation behind them in Connecticut. How can we bring them to this state? This type of project, if we spend the money on to do it correctly, this is the type of project that will change this state going forward. And I'm sorry, but if we simply focus on those behind the wheel for another 100 years, we're going to continue to do the same things that we've done for the last 50 or 60 years and run ourselves into the ground. Our grandchildren are going to look at us and say, why did you make the same mistake that you did over and over again?
Check.
As an extension of doing this whole project, it seems to me, at least my focus is the economic development for the city of Hartford. We have not grown economically in decades. We haven't developed anything in decades. Our latest thing is that silly stadium. But in reality, there's no development going on here. if we're going to spend billions or billions of dollars on this, repairing this highway, I'd like to see more focus on economic development. Not just this pie in the sky, well, that might be nice. We're going to put those caps on. What is that going to do for our economic development? Doesn't sound like much, because you can't put anything on top of them except a parking lot. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I know there's two areas where there is tracts of land where there could be some economic development. But I think we need to make that a part of what we're doing now forward. The city will not survive. There will not be jobs for the children and grandchildren if we don't increase Hartford's economic development.
While you have the microphone, your reaction to the East Coast, the linear park, East-West linear park, this concept we showed you?
I guess it's good, but what is it going to bring to the city? Is it going to create a demand for restaurants? Is it going to create a demand for more hotel spaces? We've got 2 vacant hotels in Hartford. That's not good. I don't know what that's going to bring to the city. In theory, there must be something good about it, but I don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah, and you know, Jack, we've seen from these types of facilities in other places that they do have strong economic development tie-ins. I mean, if we're thinking about maybe potential housing in the Parkville neighborhood or West End and development in the Asylum Hill area, you can imagine that could be a really exciting thing for developers and for people who want to live in the city and work in the city but don't necessarily want to fight the congestion. You know, we've seen it. We've seen what happened when Flower Street closed. You know, restaurants in Capitol Avenue struggling because the demand from Netna dried up. Connecting that again could do exactly that, could reinvigorate some of those businesses. So you know, we actually think that there's some pretty strong economic development potential with the trail. We've seen it bear out in other places. But again, ultimately, economic development is something that we can't make happen. There's a lot of forces at play, a lot of private interests, and the city needs to be heavily involved. But that's why we're spending time making sure that these ideas are integrated into the project so that everybody can see the opportunities, and hopefully that will stimulate the conversation, and we'll see that happen.
Why can't we make that happen?
Well, you can. I'm saying the state of Connecticut, the DOT's mission is to solve this infrastructure problem and the traffic and safety. But we're talking about this stuff because we think it's integral to the project, and we need support. We need others to come to the table and talk about this stuff.
Just to add to that, the New York High Line, if no one's familiar with that, actually runs by the Hudson Yard development, which is probably the largest private development going on in the country right now. And it is almost always shown in the pictures of the development for both the residential and commercial occupants. It's clearly a quality of life feature that's perceived as desirable. I think if we're going to put this highway through the middle of an urban center to throw a 5% premium on for quality of life enhancements onto the project is a reasonable price tag, because I do think if anybody's, probably the complaint in New York right now from residents is the High Line's so successful, those that live next to it don't like all the traffic getting off and on the High Line. So, I mean, you know, that's kind of what's going on. People suggestion. Yeah, people on bikes.
Are there other questions? Sandy?
Yeah.
I can bring you the microphone.
No, I
over.
don't need a mic. No. I'm good.
No, you don't want it?
No. I'll raise an issue that Mike won't get real excited about, I don't think, but from the perspective of the Greater Hartford Transit District, we've been a little concerned as we've seen the evolution of thinking about the urban design in the vicinity from Union Station over to the location of a new rail station. Our understanding had been early on that there would be an attempt to really create a single intermodal center, even though rail is over here and bus is over here, and that seems to be disappearing from some of the concepts. Our vision has been when people come and they park for the rail station or the bus center, it's like going to an airport. You don't really know what concourse you're going to. You follow the signs and you get there. And so that once you've arrived at some central place, you've arrived at both the rail station and the bus station. And I just would encourage you to continue to consider that, and also to think really hard about the access to parking station and the bus station, because that will be so important for people to have easy access to get there.
Yeah, sure. Sandy, we've looked at that and definitely want to hear more from your studies and what you think that looks like. But there's lots of opportunities to connect both to the rail annex to the west and Union Station to the east. And what we're showing is sort of a garage or some kind of central gathering element that you could come to and then circulate off in either direction through a corridor that connects both facilities. So I think we're thinking along those lines too. I definitely want to continue that conversation.
But as you may know, we're having a master plan done right now, which is current, future, short-term, future, and long-term. So I think that's going to tie into this pretty well as you continue with your study.
And I think you're going to start to see graphics coming out tonight and other times where we're going to see sort of blank areas around that, because we can, as Mitch always likes to say, we can draw things, but we're probably not going to get it right. But we're heading in that direction. We need more feedback. We need more involvement from you all, the city, and we need to figure out what that looks like. But I think in principle, we kind of know that that's an important piece, and how do we tie that together? And we're getting to that stage of the project that we're going to now be able to flesh out those ideas. So thank you for bringing that up.
Any other?
She had to, or she wouldn't have gotten paid today.
So at AAA, we've been doing a lot of studying about driving and the autonomous, semi-autonomous vehicles. And a lot of our research is showing that the way people are going to be changing how they think about cars, and in the future, and not so distant future, they might just own like shares. There'll be a lot of car sharing, and that it's going to impact urban design and even the amount of parking that's needed and things like that. So my question is, are you taking the rapidly advancing changes in car technology and the way people are thinking and using their cars, and are you taking that into consideration when I hear you talking about transit? It's almost kind of like the meeting of drivers in transit. So how does that figure in, or has it figured into any of your considerations?
Yeah, it's an excellent comment, Amy. I think what a lot of us are really unsure about what that future is going to look like. We know autonomous vehicles are a reality. They're going to, whether it's 5, 10, 20 years before they fully get implemented, we don't know, and we don't know if that's going to create more or less congestion. But what we do know is that we're not planning this highway the way we've planned highways 50 years ago. We're not saying, well, there's this exponential growth rate that's going to continue on into the future, and we need to build a highway big enough to accommodate it. We're basically using almost a flat growth rate. We're assuming that there's not going to be a lot of new trips, very, very low growth, and so we're basically trying to satisfy the demand that's out there today, expecting that all of the changes that we're seeing in preference for driving, new technologies, all that stuff is going to hopefully mitigate the need for lots of new cars on the road. So that's how we're sort of handling it in this project.
And I just want to say that I'm not just talking about like self-driving cars per se. I'm really even referring to car sharing like Uber and Lyft that the kids are already using, And when you talk about the millennials and keeping them here, I mean, that's really, their thinking is a lot different than, goes of us.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason Uber Pool's been created. They found that there's so many Uber vehicles in sections of New York City and other big cities that it's creating more congestion. So they're now figuring out how to get more vehicles off the road by pooling. So it's such a fast evolving thing in transportation right now. They're finding the same thing at intermodal centers like the STC in Stanford. You got shuttles, you got Uber, you got taxis, you got so many vehicles that it's just choking the system. So it could potentially create problems in some areas. So again, I think it's a conversation we're having. We're still planning our highway to move vehicles, move goods, and make it safer and more efficient than it is today, just without adding lanes and capacity.
Any other comments, thoughts, questions from the PAC? I'm interested in the feedback on the linear park.
So, as a host community to trails in East Hartford, I know Hartford is, and some of the other surrounding municipalities, I hope we're taking a look at, when we consider this linear trail, of the sustainability of the trail. It's one thing to build it, it's another thing to identify who's going to own and maintain it going forward, what those resources would be, some of those thoughts.
we want an immediate reaction to that, or you're just? Sure. Certainly to be determined who would own and maintain. If we build it, we would likely own the structure. We would inspect and maintain the structural components. And then the surface, we would look to a local entity to maintain it, snow removal, surface maintenance, et cetera. As a nearby example, the Riverfront Plaza, DOT, State Highway project built that infrastructure, the Riverfront Plaza, that acre-and-a-half facility down to the river. We built the elevator, the ADA access. So we own and maintain and inspect the structural component. The city of Hartford was able to delegate that, if you will, to MDC through an arrangement. And so now it's secure, there's people who monitor it, and it's well maintained. And the good news is that they have all the planning of the activities so that it's used. And there was concern during the planning of that project that would we be building a white elephant, if you will. But the good news, I mean, it's such an asset to the community. So we'll have to go through that same thought process here if this gains traction.
I have a question for you. I really don't need that either, but have you come up, I'm sorry. Have you come up with new numbers as far as the first year of the New Haven to Springfield rail? How many cars you think you'll take off the road?
I always turn to Dave for that. How many cars
I don't really have the ridership data on that. I know starting in 2018, they're going to add, I think it's 18 trains from New Haven to Hartford, and I think it's about 12 between Hartford and Springfield. There is ridership projections. I just don't have that data available. There's current projections, and there's also the future design year projections.
I just have a general comment on that, because it's kind of like building a bike lane on one road and then expecting lots of people to ride it. I mean, it's less about the specific mode or specific facility and more about the system. And then I think that's going to be an incredible asset, having this commuter rail system to this part of the state, which currently doesn't exist. But it's got to tie into Fast Track. It's got to tie in with the local transit system. It's got to tie in with bike ped amenities. I think once you build out the system, I think that, the models will tell you the ridership's one thing, but when you have a system and you have real true choices so that you can get off a train, get on a bus, grab a bike share, walk to where you want to go, that's when the magic happens, right? That's when people really get out of the cars and free up the highway lanes. So, and I think we're seeing all this stuff sort of coming together and sort of, reaching that convergence point. It's going to take a few, several years, but we're doing everything we can with this project to make that tie it all in together. So I'm glad you brought it up, because it's anybody's guess right now.
Anything else? Going once, going twice?
I'm going to open it up to...
Anybody from the community in general? Any questions or comments? Gentlemen, behind you.
I'm from Sedeka, the power plant in Hartford. Most of the state agencies that we deal with have been treating everything as business as usual as far as this goes. And at the same time, we get that it's going from you guys. So we kind of need an answer, because we have a $5 million project coming up next year that kind of needs to be done.
And the answer you're looking for is?
Whether or not this is going to go, or if you're not going to get the funding.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the shorter answer is I can't give you an answer now. We can't give anybody an answer because we're just not there yet. Someone mentioned when we're talking about funding, we can't go into final design, and we'd be looking to go into final design at 2018. And if we don't have a financial plan, meaning how are we going to pay for this, and what would be the consequences to our other project needs, we won't be able to advance, we won't be able to acquire property, we certainly wouldn't be able to explore or start to go to construction with any construction contract. So we may not have an answer until 2018, a firm answer, the project's a go. Right? We may not be there until then. Okay. Anybody else
from the public?
We're here all day.
Yeah, so I think Dave had mentioned we've got people stationed around here. We're here available to talk, visit the models, a lot of cool stuff being developed. We've got the boards over here, so thank you for your time. This was a great turnout. I'm glad you all made it up here to this great facility, and we're happy to stick around and talk to you more.